who've shared stories with me about Joanna Moody. Joanna Moody, we know, lived to be 115 years old. And so when we go back and we look at when this pole was carved, we know that she was about 25 to 35 years old when she had this commissioned as a matriarch. So this tells you the kind of person that she was, and she was a strong woman. She had the pole carved to honor Tawit, who was a fallen warrior, her nephew, and her family. He died protecting our honor and our sovereignty. And you'll see his name represented in the pole by the ravens. We know it was carved by Oye, who was a prolific carver of his time. And what I really appreciate about this story, as I reflect upon it, is that Joanna undertook significant leadership as a matriarch in a time of distress. She undertook her leadership at one of the worst times of genocide that we've experienced as Nisga'a peoples. She also had to undertake her leadership during a time of deep grief, as she was called upon to erect this memorial pole to honor Tawit, a family member. However, it was her strength and her stature as a matriarch that I see as an inspiration. She did the right thing for our house. And we felt her spirit guiding us so many times over these last 4 years. When we've hit barriers, when we weren't sure what was going to happen, something would change and all of a sudden the doors would open and we could feel her with us. I first learned about the pole 4 years ago when I was visiting Samagat Nistal, and he asked me to go out and find some more information on one of the names that was on that pole before a feast that we were going to have. He told me at that time that this pole, we had an original pole that was in Scotland, and that we had a delegation that had traveled there prior to the ratification of the Nisga'a Final Agreement. And they had gone to the National Museums of Scotland and told them they wanted it back. But at that time, they were told that the pole was too old to be moved. So after I left Samagat Nistal's house, I began to undertake research on this pole. And it was there that I discovered that the pole itself had been moved since the delegation had gone to Scotland. So that made me very angry. So we went back to Samagat Nistal, and we worked on a grant together in partnership with many people here in the community. And this grant enabled us to have the funding we needed to be able to go to Scotland and once again go into the National Museums of Scotland and let them know that we wanted our pole returned. So in August of 2022, about 13 months ago, the right people came forward to support us in our first delegation. So we had Donald Leeson, Pamela Brown, Andrew Robinson, Teresa Schober, Shauna McKay, myself, and Samagat Nistal walk into the National Museums of Scotland in August of 2022. We went in with much uncertainty, but with even more determination. And I truly believe that we went in with one of the biggest strengths that we have as Nisga'a peoples. We went in with our hearts and our minds working as one in unity together. During our time in Edinburgh, we expressed to the museum, its board, and to the Government of Scotland that our reason for coming to Scotland was that we wanted our children to be able to wake up every day and not have to work so hard to learn about the stories of who we are. We wanted our children to be able to experience our family history and our precious family member with every breath that they take. Every breath that they take. We spoke about the troubling imperial and colonial history that we've all inherited and the future that we have the ability to change for our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren. We did our research. We shared evidence that the Government of Canada, through orders given by Duncan Campbell Scott himself, had given Canada's permission to remove the pole from our village and sell it to a museum while we were out. We let the people of Scotland know that we wanted the spirit of this pole to be free here in our lands and be connected here with our people where it belongs. And it didn't take too long before it became apparent in our negotiations that we had a clash of worldviews and misunderstandings about the true ownership of this pole. There was mutual recognition on the need to create space that could acknowledge both of our legal systems, our laws, and our cultures, But we didn't know how to get there in our first meeting, and I can say that we left Scotland still trying to work on that one. We also know that the truth of history can be told in many different ways. And one of the things that absolutely touched our hearts when we were in Scotland were the children. Because it was the children who acted as witnesses when we were in the museum, and we told them the story about this pole and its theft from our nation. Children have an innate sense of justice, and they know the difference between right and wrong. And it didn't take very long for the children to come up to us and to send their parents to us and ask them what language we were speaking, what songs we were singing, because they wanted to learn them. And they said, "You should get your pole back, it's wrong. It shouldn't have been stolen from you." We left Scotland not knowing if we would get our pole back, and we had about 3 months of uncertainty. And I'll admit now that when we first went there, I had a belief that we would be able to have them come to a decision in 3 days about our pole. And it was our own delegation that told me to slow down and not to be so impatient and perhaps give them a little bit of time. And so we agreed to wait 3 months for a decision to come from the National Museums of Scotland. The day that we heard the news, it didn't really hit me. I was really in a lot of disbelief, and I think many of us were. It took almost a week before I really began to feel the impact of knowing it was coming home. And it was only after I heard a story from Sheldon Robinson. He had met an elder from Kwantlen Nation. And as a child, both her and her brother had lived in Edinburgh, and they would go and visit our pole. And she said it brought them a sense of grounding, and it made them feel not so alone when they were in Scotland. And so upon hearing that story, I broke down crying. I think I cried for about 30 minutes. I felt such a deep sense of relief in knowing that for 94 years that the pole, it was visited, it was loved, and it received love from children. And it wasn't alone. And I felt a lot better after that. We're grateful to the allies within the museum who helped us to get the pole back, as well as many people around the world and many of you that are here. So we went back to Scotland a second time, and that was only a month ago, and we had an opportunity to expand our delegation, and we're so grateful to Samagat La and Samagat Duke, who also traveled with us. But before we left, I had a dream, and it's a little scary to share this dream out loud, but I'll use my courage to do that. In this dream, I saw rows and rows of totem poles in front of our government buildings here in the Nass. They were so beautiful, but they were out of balance. And all I could see was black form lines. And if I looked really closely, you could see the red. It was almost like a faint, kind of blushy kind of pink. It was there, but you had to look really hard for it. It was faded. So when I woke up, I found my brother, Calvin McNeil, and in this lifetime, Samagat Awit. And I told him about this dream when he was in his carving studio. So he visualized this dream in a really powerful way in an image that we'll share with you at the feast. I'm not going to spoil it. But I recall telling him, we need to bring the red back in. The red must be more visible. Otherwise, the poles will be out of balance. Our life will be out of balance. The red needs to be in there, and it needs to be in balance with the black. I also share my gratitude to Samagat Duke, who powerfully shared with me that Niska women are the lifeline of our society many years ago. He did so as part of a recommendation for our school district on ways to strengthen Niska language and culture in our school district. And I just remember him sharing that teaching so eloquently. I recognize it requires all of us, our men, our women, our two-spirit, working together to create balance by honoring each other's roles and responsibilities to support our children. I've also had people ask me about the term rematriation. And when we first started this process, I was using the term repatriation. And as I began to think about it more, I felt it was important for us to begin to challenge patriarchal and colonial terms that don't apply to us. We are a matrilineal society. I also recognize that it's important not just to change our language, And that for rematriation to really have meaning, we also need to, we really need to take action. We've all been impacted by the Indian Act, and it's a process that we're still working on and healing through. And that's why today is so important in terms of bringing this poll home to us. It's going to continue to require us to take courage and question why we're doing things the way that we're doing them. Is this what our ancestors would have wanted? Why can't we do that? Who isn't in the room to help us make this decision? How can we work together? How can we support each other? And how can we be in balance with each other's roles and responsibilities? How can we model this to our children? And how can we show reverence and be inspired by the actions of our ancestors to shape our leadership for a better future? We have so many thank yous to give to people, and we've had so many incredible stories and relationships and funny moments, as Mr. Robinson has alluded to. And with each step of that, we can always feel the spirit of the pole and our dear grandmother who's with us. I'd also like to end by thanking Samagat Nisdal for bringing all of us on an adventure of a lifetime and continuing to model and teach us the importance of learning more about our family history and working together with our hearts and minds as one in order to be able to bring our ancestors home. And I thank Joanna for just guiding us and being here with us today. So we look forward to continuing our thank yous at our feasts. Twig Sinism.